Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar, Lighting Design for Concert Touring, Efficient Workflows and Approaches with Roland Greil. My name is Michael Grandinetti and I'm a Content Marketing Coordinator here at Harman. A few things before we get started. Everyone on the call is muted to keep down noise levels during the webinar. However, there is a Q&A function where you can submit questions to the presenter and he will try to answer as many as possible at the end. This webinar will also be recorded and the link will be made available a few days after the presentation. We do have a number of other webinars taking place over the next few months for audio, lighting, video, and control, and we encourage you to take a look at the different webinars in our Learning Sessions workshop series on pro.harman.com, as well as by visiting Harman Professional Training to see our many on-demand and certification courses that are available to you for free. And now I would like to introduce to you the presenter for today's webinar. Roland's work as a designer, programmer, and director includes some of the biggest names in the world of music like Adele, Phil Collins, the Rolling Stones, and many others, alongside TV shows, special events, and theater productions. His work has been nominated for multiple awards internationally. And now I'll pass it over to you, Roland.
Hello, good evening from Germany, or good morning, wherever you are out there in the world. It's a pleasure to be here. And thanks, Michael, for the lovely introduction. And yes, as Michael said, today we want to talk a little bit about lighting design for concert and touring. And in specific, we want to have a look at the workflows and how you can approach designing shows in an efficient manner and an efficient way. Because obviously, it would be possibly impossible to teach you or to tell you how to design a show in an hour, roughly an hour, the time we have here online. But I can possibly give you some tips and some ideas how you can improve your workflow or how you can attack things in an efficient way. So to start with, let's have a little look on what we want to talk about today. So technically, a little overview. We're talking about lighting design for concert touring, especially the workflows. We'll start with a little introduction about myself so that you get a little feel what I do or where I come from. And then we look at an example project to really go from the very early steps to the final result to show. So we look at the first steps, initial design process, how you put them on paper or into the computer, how you then do a little bit more technically defined CAD plots and technical pre-production, how you pre-visit, show scripts, cue lists, pre-programming, all the steps down the road, which ultimately lead us to the final result, the show, the design, which we've designed and which we bring out and open up to a big audience. Doesn't matter in our times, it would be in an online audience or a streamed audience, or in the more normal times, it would be a live audience, and hopefully soon it will be again a live audience. And I think the key is to get from point A, which is literally the first steps, to point Z, the last point, read the result, the show, in an as efficient manner as possible for a few reasons. But first of all, let's have a quick look on my background. And literally, I want to start with an image to tell you where it all started. So because I kind of like to show people how far passion can take you in our lovely industry, and passion and dedication and constantly improving on your work. So it literally all started somewhat nearly 30 years ago in the garage of my parents. And that was possibly my very first professional lighting rig. And I thought it's the biggest lighting rig in the world. It's literally just where I come from. And now fast forward nearly 2 decades or over 2 decades, two decades later, it all went to a little bigger shows. And I realized that there are bigger lighting rigs out there, and there's a big playground. And after 25 or 26 years in our industry, I still love it. So in our day and age, I work mostly in concert touring or let's say live entertainment, anything music related, doing design work as well as programming work, associate design work, and direction work for multiple clients. I collaborate a lot with my friends from Woodruff Bassett Design, Patrick Woodruff and Adam Bassett. We do a lot of shows together. I worked on a lot of their shows and vice versa. On the other side, we founded the Black Project, which is another company. Florian Bieder is also a design company. If you look from top left, there are a few examples of the work of the last I would say, nearly 6 or 7 years here. So I've been involved in projects like Rolling Stones or Phil Collins and whatever Michael already has said. So what those two slides show us is not necessarily anything to do with lighting design, but it shows us that there is definitely a great career if you're passionate and if you're motivated in our industry. And still now 25 odd years in this industry, I still love it, and I don't see it as a job. I see it as a passion. So first of all, let's have a quick look on what show we're looking at. Obviously here we're looking at some big shows. As an example, I've chosen a production I did together with Patrick Woodruff and for Patrick Woodruff back in 2013, an Italian artist, Gianna Nannini. Possibly hardly anybody will know her. Big Italian artist. She was quite big in Europe for a while and in South America. Anyway, so there's Gianna Nannini. It was production. I've chosen this one because it's not too complicated, not too big, but it will show us quite well how we get from the very first ideas to our goal, to the final design in an efficient manner. And why do we want to do that in an efficient manner? That has multiple reasons. I think that to start with, and it doesn't matter of the size of the show, if you're talking about a club tour or if you're talking about the biggest stadium tour in the world, you're always kind of facing two big restraints, and those two big restraints are budget and time. And obviously both of them are linked together, because with less budget, you've got less time to realize your visions and so on and so forth. So it is important to keep that in the back of your head, that you're always kind of fighting time and budget. And even so, on the biggest shows, you will never have enough time. Even if you have whatever month of programming a show, you will still, at the end of the 2 months or something like that, you will think, oh, I could handle another few days to make it better. So this is basically one of the most important reasons why we want to work efficiently. On the other hand, possibly the very most important reason, or the most important reasons anyway, is that we want to spend our time not only in empty arenas or in empty stadiums or in empty clubs. We want to spend our time also somewhere on the bar or in the pool, or do some nice stuff. So therefore, it's also quite handy to work in an efficient manner. So literally, where does it all start? We're going to have a look at a few first steps, and those first steps, I've split them in 3 categories. So technically now we think our Italian management from Gianna Nannini has approached us, and they want us to do a design for them. And how do we approach the design in the very, very early stage? And I think it's quite key to understand before you ever think about putting a pen to paper, or to really start to work on the design, or to really think about what lights am I using, what video screens am I using, all that stuff. At that point, you've got to do your homework first. You've got to prepare yourself as good as possible to be ready to really deliver something which is good, and which will guarantee a good end result, which makes the client happy, and happy clients will return. And also it prepares you to go through the whole process in an efficient manner again. So I've split that in technically in 3 categories. So first of all, there is the boring, or not only, I wouldn't say boring, but to a certain degree it is boring, the technical background. There are things like the hard facts. Hard facts include, you've got to think from the beginning, kind of do your research, do your homework to get a real feel of the desired production size, or what they're aiming for, kind of. So what size of venues will this production will the production play in? Will it be huge stadiums, or will it be huge arenas, or will it be smaller clubs, or sound stages, or anything? You just need to get a feel, because obviously from the get-go and from the beginning, you want to design something, or you want to put something together which is realistic, and also realistic in the way that you can build it in, at least, let's say, in 80 or 90% of the venues the production will play in. It is beautiful to design something which is huge, humongously big, and they play whatever, let's say 20 shows with it, but they can only build it in 3 of the 20 shows, then you, in my opinion, then you kind of fail to a certain degree. Why? Because it is not a problem if you've got 2 shows in 20 shows where you've got to do a B version or a scaled down version. But obviously in the majority of the places, they will load it in. It has to work. So venue size is critical. On the other side, obviously, budget. Budget is key. As much as we love to work without any budget limits, even if you look at the bigger shows, there are budget limits. And especially nowadays, where the whole kind of music industry has changed, that they're not making their money with records anymore. They're now making their money with live shows, or possibly in the future streams and things like that. It is important to work within budget, and it is really key to get an understanding of their budget limitations. Obviously, you can always play a little bit with the budget, and when you pitch for a design, or you send out your first specification for a certain design, it could be a little bit over budget, because I always use that analogy. If I spec a show, obviously I start to spec a Ferrari, because if you spec a Ferrari, you possibly end up at the end of the day with all budget limitations. You will end up with a BMW, which is still kind of a good car. But if you start to spec just a BMW, you will for sure end up with a Volkswagen, which is possibly not the thing you want. But nevertheless, you should get a feel if they can afford a Ferrari. Then you can go for a Bugatti. If they can only afford a Volkswagen, you shouldn't offer them a Ferrari or a Porsche, because that's too big. So it should be somewhere within budget restraints. It will just show that you're thinking about their show, about their budget, and so on and so forth. Also, a general framework, all the other important informations. How much crew will they take? How many trucks will they take? How much time will they have to load it in? Will it be a stadium show where they always have a production load-in day and you've got plenty of time to rig 1,000 lights and tons of trusses and automation and all the gags? Or do they have to do that back to back? So it has to be doable. It has to be feasible within all the limitations we've talked about before, like venues, budget, and so on and so forth. And obviously, if there are any other important informations or things to know, everything is useful. The more you know, the better you will be in the better you will be designing or putting together the show, and the more the client will like you, because you're not offering them something they either couldn't afford, or is too big, or is not the right thing for them. So that was kind of the first part of my let's call it the research and development phase, the research phase, where I do, or we should do, our homework to get as much information as possible together. Now we're looking next one, which is especially looking at the design now from a creative standpoint, a very, very, very important part of the research work. So the creative background includes many points. I've just put up a few, which I think sums it up quite well. You've got to have, as much as possible, a background knowledge of the artist, because ultimately what we are doing, and this is also an important thing, I think we will touch it a few times more during our hour together, is we are creating literally a picture frame around their performance on the stage, and it is always about them. They are the stars of the show. At no point our lighting or our production design or our video design will be ever the star. We are never in the center. The center will always be the artist. So it has to be the right picture frame for the right guy or the right band or the right show, which is happening on stage, or the right performance. So it is very important to get as much background knowledge of the artist as possible. So things like his history, where does he come from, what has he played before, personal taste, how does he tick, what does he think, what is his kind of dreams and visions. The more you know, the better you can design for him, and the better you can create this picture frame around him, or this scenery, literally. So as well as the message, every artist has a message, or kind of message. I call it message, like, is that music about whatever? country music? Is it about living on the countryside, about trucks, about the Wild West? Is it about whatever historical things? Is it about love? Is it about anything? Is it like what is he trying to say with his performance? And a little side note here: a lot of the things we're looking here, I mean, I'm talking about a concert here, but they're all pretty much transferable on other genres. Like a theater show, the approach is not much different, or even a corporate show, the approach is not much different. Obviously, you possibly don't have an artist on stage, you have possibly a theatrical performance on stage, or you've got a product presentation on stage. But at the end of the day, all those also include a message, or there is something they want to transport, either with their music or with their theatrical piece, or with the new car they're presenting, or with a TV show. There's always a message. Then you've got to think about a visual appearance. Let's stay with the artist. They've got a kind of a visual appearance, which is like a red line through their artwork on album covers, and what kind of clothes are they wearing, how they're kind of showing themselves in public, because that's an important element. It's visual, and what we are doing is visual design at the end of the day. And it is, again, if the picture frame around the artist on stage fits the clothes of the artist on the stage, it will look better, and it will be more cohesive at the end of the day. So it's quite important to get a know of what their visual appearance is, or has been in the past. And there are certain bands out there where it is really key to think about their visual appearance. Bands who nearly have something like a corporate identity to a certain degree. Quick example here in between. 2 years ago, myself, Patrick, and Florian Rieder, we designed a stadium show for the German band Rammstein, which is quite a theatrical show. But when we started to do our homework, it was very, very important to us to get a feel and to really learn their corporate identity of their band, because it's a very important element. This is a very visual band, and people who have worked for them before us, like Leroy Bennett, who did a great job for them for years, they created a certain corporate identity. Obviously, you want to put your own handwriting on, but it has to stay within those restraints of that visual appearance of a certain artist or band. Again, the taste of and the personal taste. If you know, or if you've got the chance to get to know what those people, the humans behind the artist, like, it will give you a better understanding of what they will like in form of a design, technically. So ask as many questions as possibly, or if you can't ask the questions, I mean, thanks God we've got the World Wide Web and all yellow press and all the press out there. There is a lot to learn about individuals who act as artists. And the more you know about those persons and their tastes, the better it is, and the easier it will be to really design something which works for them. Obviously, as said before, that's kind of what I already mentioned with the taste and the visual appearance and the CI of a band. It's important. Obviously, have a look at what the previous designs have been, for two reasons. First of all, if you know for sure that they hated their previous designs because they were not happy with them, you will know immediately what you shouldn't do or the way you shouldn't go. But obviously, if there is a reason that they were quite happy with their previous designs, it gives you a good kind of baseline to start from. And obviously, you always should do your own thing, but it should be within the world where the artist feels kind of secure and safe and at home, technically. And very important, the input from the client and the artist. And this is something we should never forget. There's also one thing to add here. There's something which we never should forget, either in the first steps or even down the road until really the opening night and until delivery of your design work. It is that we are service providers. And again, we will never be, or we should never be in the limelight. We are not the stars. We are just creating this picture frame, or we're creating this canvas for the artist to paint the detail in. So we're working for them and we're representing them. So it is important to get as much information from the artist or from the client as possible, and also to build a relationship. In the perfect world, it will be a relationship on eye level, so that you really can collaborate and create together, because then you will fly, then you will create magic. It's all about collaboration, working together, and that starts within the teams, with programmers, different designers, associates, and so on, and production. But it also includes the artist, and it should include the artist, because again, it is very important to really transport or present them in the best possible way, and therefore it can only help if they have got their ideas. Obviously, there are very different types of humans out there, or artists out there. So there are some out there which are kind of letting you do whatever you want because they trust you 100%, and you can do whatever you want. And there is the other extreme, where you've got an artist who's got a very specific vision of how it should look and how it should work, who will dictate you literally every look, and who will tell you what he wants. I think if you're lucky enough to work with artists who are in the middle of those two extremes, it's perfect. Somebody who trusts in your work, but also puts in his own 2 cents, obviously. So obviously the artist's vision, important. What does he envision? What does he think? What does he think his next show should look like? Should it be very theatrical? Should it be a big extravaganza? Or should it be more intimate? Should it be kind of more about the performance on stage? Then again, there's one thing which is very, very key in the whole design process, and also in the way to decide which way you go with your design. It is the stage presence of an artist, because some artists need a huge theatrical extravaganza around them, and they're possibly known for it, but they also need them. Others have got such an amazing stage presence that technically they could play in a venue as long as they can be seen and they're lit. It's fine. The show will work. And that's something really, really key, which is sometimes forgotten by some colleagues, without being critical here about others' work. But it's all about that. And I've got 2 examples here. If you, for instance, look at a band like Pink Floyd, who've been very famous for their big shows and with a lot of effects and all that stuff. If you now think about why did they create those visual extravaganzas, for a reason. Because if you look at them when they were still together, they created amazing music. They were amazing musicians. But to look at them on a stage, put away all your thoughts and don't think about all the gags around them. Just think about them on a lit stage. They are quite boring to watch at. So there's every reason for them to create these beautiful shows around them, and to create this very massive, impactful designs. Now look at another artist. Let's take a band or a single artist I worked for, again, for Woodruff Bassett Design a few years ago, Adele. Amazing British lady, amazing talent, great voice, but also an impressive stage presence. So theoretically, you could have taken her, put her in a stadium, take 4 follow spots, point them at her so that everybody can see her, possibly add some IMAX screens that everybody can see her close up, and make sure your PA works. It would have been a blast. The show would have worked for 2 hours, and it would have been great. So doing a show for such an artist with a huge presence on stage, you don't need to do every gag in the world. It would be just distracting, and it doesn't add anything. It takes away from it. If you then do whatever, fire, CO2, video content, millions of lighting cues, it's not right. So think about the stage presence, and think about what the artist needs and what enhances his performance, and not what distracts from his performance technically. Then there is obviously a third part to it, which I called the general knowledge. And technically, literally, as I said before, any knowledge is good knowledge. Possibly you won't ever use it, but possibly it could be very useful. And sometimes to know the most stupid backgrounds about your client could be quite useful down the road in a conversation with him or working on your design. So therefore, private and personal backgrounds of people are as important as their artistic vision. If you've got a chance to gather that information, do it. It is key for the success and to create something which will work and where you don't need to create 15 or 20 versions of a design until they're happy. Normally, you should aim for just purely looking at on a creative design within whatever 3 or 4 versions, you should be pretty much final beside of technical fine-tuning. Obviously, there will be artists out there where you will need to do more revisions of your work technically. Now, that was our first step. So we all gathered that information. We put that on a piece of paper, or we just got that in our minds. That gives us all the information to really start. What does the show need and how should the show look like? And still at this point, we are possibly not at the point yet to think about the technology we want to use. At least my approach is that way. I think about kind of the looks I want to create, the imagery I want to create, this picture frame I want to create around the artist. How should it look? What is the look and feel of it? And how does it really work from a artistic standpoint? So it is important to free think first. Obviously, within your limitations we've just learned of possibly not budget yet, but at least of venue sizes and all those technical limitations. But then it will tell you what kind of instruments you will need to kind of translate your artistic vision or your design vision into reality. And this will possibly start really, it could start just in your head. Everybody's different there. It could start just like here. It was an easy show, so some simple, very simple sketches. Some people are very talented, but technically, as long as they show what it is or what the content is, or kind of can tell what you're thinking of. So you pay a pen to paper and you sketch your first ideas. Obviously here it is a stupid rough sketch and something done in a few minutes, and it starts with, hey, now you know it will be arenas, it will allow you to build a stage of that on that size. So you build a stage and you create the shape of the stage based on those artistic visions or creative visions I've just mentioned. So you now try to start to translate them into something which works in reality. Then you create your first I wouldn't call it lighting plot. If you look at the top right corner here, it is the very first rough version of a lighting plot. And if you look at there, it is not defined what kind of light we want to use. It is defined by what the light should do. So it is your axes are washes, your circles are spots, your others are beam lights, and so on and so forth. So it technically is just more about you thinking about, I want to use that kind of light at this position to create a certain look or to light something in a specific way. Down the road, you then obviously have got to decide or specify a certain product, but to begin with, it's not important because there is kind of a big selection of different wash lights out there on the market. And even if possibly the Martin wash light is the very best one in the world, you possibly will end up to use a different product from a different manufacturer because your vendor will just have them. So you've got to be flexible there. So you get together your first sketches, and also, I mean, there's just some lighting designs or kind of lighting sketches. Same on the set design or production design side. You start with sketching, and some are more talented, some are less talented. It doesn't need to be on paper. In nowadays, nearly 8 or 9 years later, I'm using kind of a sketch app on my iPad, Concepts. If anybody is ever looking for a great sketching app on the iPad, there's Concepts, it's called. It's amazing, and it works quite well, even for somebody like me who's not really talented in hand drafting at all. So now the next step, obviously, we put our pen to a paper, and it could be a piece of toilet paper after a lovely night at a bar, because creativity has got no schedule. There are the craziest moments where you have the best ideas. So wherever it ends up, your paper or on your iPad or wherever, you now have got to start to think about translating that into some more technical, detailed drawings. So thanks God for CAD, so computer-aided design, which has been around for now a long time. That process could be quite painless, and the people who can draw CAD, I mean, I'm in the luxurious position that somebody else draws for me, but nevertheless, those tools out there are really helpful to work efficiently nowadays as well. So you put together your first CAD plot, and those kind of plots, again, this is now a translation of the sketch we've seen before. It's still the stage with a slightly arched front downstage edge. It's still a little arch truss as a front truss, and a few electrics over the stage, and a back truss with some lights filled again with spots, wash lights, whatever we thought we wanted to use to create our looks, which we've envisioned in our design work. But that step is important, because now it also will show us that this design we thought of and we sketched on our piece of paper, it will work from a technical standpoint. It will fit in most of the venues the production will play. The more technical people can already start to think about weights and on all the technical details and limitations. And obviously it's an important thing also to kind of get a budget together, to get a feel. How many crew do you need to load it in? How many trucks do you need to transport it from A to B every day? How much will the whole rental for the rig cost? Will that all those numbers together, will those fit into the production budget technically? Now it's a quite simple plot here. It's a very first version, which our lovely studio manager has drawn up here. Looks amazing, but it looks still quite boring. So assume, and I would never issue something like that. There is another very important step in the thing. Now, when we go ahead and start to think about issuing our plots and our design work to the clients, so go into the technical pre-production, we definitely always should put that in a kind of a good-looking, professional-looking layout. Why? First of all, obviously, they need to understand what's going on here. So now the plot has got already some fixture numbers on there, some annotations, which tell us different things, some position names and all that stuff, a legend on the left side. So it has to work from a technical standpoint, and it has to be pretty much self-explanatory to somebody who has got to read the plot. But why has it got to look good as well? The layout is very crucial and very important. Just think about it from that point of view. Our design work, so we go out, this Italian lady hires us to do the design for them, and she signs a contract with us, and she will pay us, let's say, 50 grand to do the design. It's just a random number, so it's a no realistic number. So they're spending 50 grand on something they will only see when they have spent their 50 grand. So that the trust is all built on the conversations you have with them. The trust is built obviously by them looking at your credits and your references, but it could be enhanced by presenting your work. And at that stage, you're trying to convince the Italian lady or her management or her production to spend another, whatever, for 2 months tour, to spend another 300 grand to rent the gear and to hire the people to build it. So they're making quite a big investment in something they will only see when it's pretty much done to a certain degree. So it's key to give them as much trust as possible. And therefore, small things like creating a good looking lighting design package, creating something, great layouts, well looking layouts, is very important. And I've learned that from some in my eyes, some of the best in our industry, and who do a really great job with my friends from Woodruff Bassett Design. Because beforehand I always thought it's not that important. It's all about the content. But no, it is very important to present your stuff in a, as much possible professional way as possible, technically. So obviously, talking about building the trust, showing them something beforehand, for the last somewhat 20 years or 20 odd years, a little longer even, we've got the luxury of something called previsualization. So we're in earlier years, the only way to kind of visualize design ideas was to draw them. Obviously, there are things out there which are hand drawn and they're way better than any computer generated graphic. But therefore, you need somebody who's very talented in it, and it normally takes some time. And if you look at the set design side, obviously, already 30 years ago or 50 years ago, you were in a position to build some models, which are still great. And there are reasons to use models quite often, because they can show the size and scale way better than any rendering can do. But both of them either ask for a lot of talent, or in terms of models, mostly a lot of budget to create good models, or you're talented by yourself to really create them by yourself as well. But hey, some people will be like that, and some others not. But thanks God to computers and to the technology and software technology, we are now in the position to literally take our cat plots and put some life into them. So to really visualize our concepts in nowadays quite common way, a really good way to show the artist or your client beforehand what they will spend their bucks on, or what they will spend their dollars on. So it is important for them, and so that they get, again, they will trust you, and they will happily spend possibly a few extra dollars to add a few more lights or to add another screen or so. So it's quite important to create that. So you're looking at those few renderings. I mean, we've all very likely have seen renderings, and possibly have all created renderings by ourselves, very simple renderings in that case. Again, this is a few years old. But still, they did the job. So they sold her the idea of the show. Obviously, there is, like with all things we do, there's always a little caveat or a little danger in them. So it is quite important that you do make your client, your artist, aware of that you're looking at a computer-generated rendering, which always is in the perfect scenario or in the perfect world. So if you just think about you doing some beautiful visuals for an outdoor show or a stadium show, and whatever software you're using, if you're using whatever WYSIWYG, Cinema 4D, or Depends, or whatever, it doesn't matter. It will always show the perfect case scenario. So if you look at a stadium show, and obviously lighting, or a lot of lighting, it is key to have an as even as possible haze scenario or smoke scenario, that you can see the light beams. Obviously, you see in those renderings here, it looks beautiful. You see this how those spots on those arch trusses here, they draw beams and they will look amazing. Now put that in a stadium, and let me tell you, in 80% of the cases when you work in a stadium, there will be wind, and wind will be hardly in your favor. So to create that kind of haze scenario as you have here in your visualization is nearly impossible, if not completely impossible. I wouldn't say completely impossible. There are kind of exceptions to the rule. The rule, if you ever do an outdoor or a stadium show in Cairo or in Beijing in China, it will be amazing. Just a little story on the side, as a side note here. We did a big outdoor theatrical extravaganza in Cairo in Egypt in 2015, and we were all worried about how our light beams will look. But let me believe you, it was close to downtown Cairo, so there was a lot of smog in the air and a lot of dirt in the air. Let me believe you, it was worth every cuff because it was the best haze I ever had on any show. It doesn't matter if indoor or outdoors, but that is the exception. So what we want to avoid here is that somebody gets the feeling, or somebody looks at those renderings and they get lovely printouts on A2 or A3 on photo paper. They look amazing. But what you want to avoid by any chance, if that artist or that your client then takes them, walks away and is very proud of them and is really looking forward to see it in real the first time, and then you're entering, you build the show in the first stadium, you design it, you program it, and then he comes in the very first time, and that will be for sure a windy day. So at that windy day, he stands with that printout in the stadium and will look at your stage, and obviously with the wind you've got all your 35 or 40 smoke machines going, but you can't create any kind of haze to make the light beams visible. And he will stand there and say, wow, that looks different. So make them aware of that is perfect world scenario if you can. There's a little example here, even going way back. It's a show we did in 2006 where we also used visualization and even pre-programmed it back in the day. Stadium show of a punk rock band, nothing specific. As we see here, the visualization was way more basic back then than it is nowadays. But what you see here is kind of a merged image. On the left side, you see the visualizations, and we saw these lovely white beams drawing and looking great. From the middle on the right side, you've got the same look kind of photographed on a programming night there. It's the same lights, the same positions. We don't see the beams because obviously there was wind. There's a little better in the middle where we have the roof above it, because that covers the area a little bit. So if you've got enough firepower in your smoke machines, it will work there. So, but Previs is a great tool. Use it, but use it with caution. Use it really with caution. Use it if it makes sense to use it. What is our next step? So now we've sold, technically, the artist likes our visualizations or our models or our drafts. They like our design work we've done for them. Technically, it will work. It is within budgets. So literally, we are one step further, closer to realizing it and to really put it in action. And I always use that analogy of kind of designing a show is like painting. And you start with a massive brush with a really wide stroke. And that first stroke is your creative vision. And okay, that vision now, that's perfect. The artist likes it. It is within budget. Okay, now you take your next brush, which is a little thinner. Then you start to paint your detail in, and it's getting more detailed every step down the road. And before you ever think about then programming or really realizing your looks, either in Previs or in reality, use your time to create a plan, to create a script for the show. So show scripts, very important thing in my opinion, and a very handy thing. If you look at a concert, for instance, what you want to achieve is obviously you want to create the right looks for each song, but you also want to create a visual storyline throughout the show. So you don't want to show everything off in the first song. You want to transform that stage multiple times during the performance. You want to create this visual storyline. You want to create this visual drama. Therefore, you need to put your pen to paper again and create a script like you would do writing a play for theater. You're creating a visual theater around it. It doesn't matter if it's a very big one or a small one, but therefore it's quite handy to put together a script. Obviously, at some point down the road, you possibly will end up getting information from your client. You know all your background information, but at some point you hopefully will be in a position to get a rough set list or a selection of songs which they will play or use for the new show which you're designing on. So you've got those songs now. Now you will have your first listen on those songs, and you will kind of associate your looks in your head and some looks in your head with specific songs. So whatever you think this song is about love, so it has to have some red in it, or this song is very industrial, it has to be cold white, or this song is a little bit more cozy, it has to be warm white, whatever you do. So you design ideas, your visions, you associate them with songs. So in the first step, you write a list with those songs, and what we're looking here is a show script from which show is it? It's a Rammstein show script, and that's the very first step we did for Rammstein. Is like we put the songs in the order the bands wants to play them. Then you think, still with a bigger brush, you think about kind of how you want to put your show in different parts, in different visual parts. Look at a rock show also in a theatrical way. Look at it that way, that you put the show in different acts, visual acts. So we put it into whatever 2, 4, 6 or 7 acts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 acts actually. Sorry, 5 acts more or less. They should be, and all 5 acts should be completely visually pretty much independent from the other act. Therefore, you start to create the acts, and then you decide which songs do fit in which act and in which kind of main visual world. Then you take finer brushes and you put in colors, you put in the other visual elements you have, like what's going on from a scenic standpoint, what do you want to show on your video screens, content, IMAC, a combination of it, will there be any pyro involved, and so on and so forth. What is your automation doing? So you, by finishing that very first show script, you've got a good overview of the drama of your show, and you can also get a feel of it. Is it balanced? Is there drama, or will it bore people after song number 4, or will you have shown everything off after song number 8, which would be boring? And so to really create the drama, put that in a script, make sure that script works already from a creative standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint. And there's another little tip. I mean, as harsh as it sounds, doing rock shows, technically there are two major moments in every rock show, and possibly, let's say, 2.5 or 3 major moments where you win and you will lose. And you will win with your very first song, or with your very first song, with your very first look. You have to nail the last song of your main set, and you've got to nail the very, very last song and the very, very last look and of the whole set. Everything what happens in between, it is important, yes, but by far not as important as the first one and the last one of the main set, as well as the encores, because that is the first song is your first kind of the first vision the audience will get, the first kind of impact you have. The last one is the memory which they will take home with them, technically. So these are the important ones. If you nail them, the rest is, I wouldn't say easy, but way easier to do, technically. So also your script will help you to put that together. So obviously then taking it into the next level, staying with that brush stroke analogy, now we're taking another finer brush and we're looking at each song specifically. And if you look at music, it's quite a thankful work, because thanks God, most of modern music, it doesn't matter if it's rock, if it's pop, if it's country, if it's metal, it's structured in a very, very similar way. So every song will have a few choruses, a few verses, a few breaks in between, a few hits, possibly a mid-8, some accents, possibly a solo or multiple solo, a bridge, and so on. But you can now break those songs down into their elements. And a little tip here on the side, when you break them down, take your time. It doesn't matter if you break them down on a piece of paper or if you use any software for it, like whatever, Reaper or Transcribe or anything like that. It doesn't matter what you use for it. Break them down, and break them down quite detailed, even if you already know that you won't use those cue points. But what you will end up in that phase is, first of all, you learn your music, very important, so you get a detailed understanding of the music you will light or you will design for. But on the other hand, I've done already whatever 25% of the programming work, because you've got all those cue points, and thanks to modern technology, a lot of the software ways to break down music will allow us to import those cue points straight into our lighting console, so that we can make use of them. And down the road, when we then create and program the show, it doesn't matter if we fill every possible cue point, and we very likely will, in most of the shows, we will only fill 30% of them or 40% of them, but they are there if we want to use them. So you don't need to think about them on site. Now, this takes us one step further. And obviously now we've done our homework. So we put together a lovely script. We've got our visions in our head about how our show should look like, how our songs should look like, and possibly even down the road, we've got already kind of envisioned how our single cue points should look like within the songs, which is now we are perfectly prepared to program the show. And if it's a small show, we will possibly program it by ourselves. Or if it's a bigger show, we'll possibly have one programmer, or we end up with a group of programmers if it's a complicated show. So you have a programmer for effect lighting, or you've got a programmer for lighting, you've got a second programmer for lighting, you've got a server programmer for media servers, and then you've got the other elements, you've got somebody programming automation, and then the pyro guy, and so on and so forth. It doesn't matter if it's one or two, but if you're prepared and if your homework done by that point, it doesn't matter if you program by yourself or your group of people is programming for yourself, you can jump right into it and you will be efficient doing that. You don't start to think about things on site. Talking on-site, there is another benefit of modern day technology, that's pre-programming, which could be very, very useful, because obviously nowadays with different software out there, we're in a position, or we've got a technology available to connect our lighting consoles or servers or automation to, and pre-program a show. Technically, we could pre-program it down to nearly a final result. Obviously, this is not what we're aiming for. In a perfect world, you still have as much time as possible with the real rig, because even the best pre-programming software can't substitute playing with the real deal to a certain degree. So pre-program, but never underestimate pre-programming. And if I look at a complicated show, again, we've recently done in 2019, the Rammstein show, which is very theatrical and very cue heavy. So the whole show has multiple thousands of cues and time-coded cues, and many very very defined things happening. But there we had a lot of time on site. We had about 3 weeks to program lighting, automation, and video in Berlin. So I had the whole rig and my whole programmer team to play with for 3 weeks, which is a luxury nowadays and age. But still, even there, we used 5 days of pre-programming beforehand. So we went to my friends of Neg Earth, a London-based lighting vendor, to lock ourselves into Dave's little pre-programming studio. In the beginning was just me and my lighting programmer, and Patrick popped in, I think, once or twice. But what we did there, it gave my programmer the chance to really get a handle for the rig, to lay out his console, to really get that all sorted, because that is, again, time which you don't need to do on site on the real set. And then again, on the programming side, stay within the same kind of concept. You take a big brush first, and with the big brush, you go through your whole set, your whole story, or your whole show script. And you create, and this is what we did for Rammstein at our 5-day pre-programming session. We created literally one look for each song. Obviously, we already had the cue points to really nail them down and detail them, but with the knowledge of having those 3 weeks, there was no need or no rush to do that. So we created one look per song. And even though if I would start in reel or have time restraints, I would still try to follow that kind of routine, to create one look per song and then go from there. Because that, again, is a big step towards your final goal. Because if you've got your main look or your main look and feel dialed in for specific numbers, then it's just detailing it. Then you work out all your accents, all your parts and differentiations within the song. So big brush stroke, do one look per song. Then you head into programming. programming, this is how I would love that it looks like. You're lying on a couch, just looking at a lighting rig, pointing at lights, and it magically happens. Obviously, the reality looks a little different. So this is, I think, yeah, that's from the Rammstein rehearsals back in the day. It was younger me sitting there with my trusted stable of programmers, Mark Brunkert and my video programmer. Both of them great chaps, and we spent multiple nights in a kind of sometimes warm, sometimes cold container looking at this empty stage. This is the harsh reality. But ultimately, this is what I say from the get-go, is like, if you create an efficient workflow, and if you've done your homework right, it will make sure that you can either be home in your cozy hotel bed earlier and not spend too much time in this cold container, or it gives you more time to really work with your rig and to really create some magic. Because as I think I said it at the beginning, we're always dealing with time and budget restraints, and especially even on such shows, time restraints are there, because even though you have 3 weeks, you're working on a quite complicated show with a big rig, and you want to really create something theatrical and something nice and beautiful. You don't want to end up by just being proud of having 1,000 lights, switch them on, let them value a little bit, and put in some gobos that will look possibly impressive, but it will not look great, or it won't be magical at all. So it is key to have as much time as possible to really detail stuff, and you make use of all your technology and translate all your creative visions into reality. Therefore, it is quite important to create an efficient workflow. An efficient workflow here is a lot about communication, a communication in between your team. And I found this lovely graphic here, which is showing some gears. And I mean, working together is always like kind of multiple gears working together. And if they work all together and turn in the right direction, everything will turn easily, and you can spin it with one hand. If there is one gear in your gear set here, which is turning the wrong way, or is a little bit too big or too small, it will take you more energy to spin your gears. So it is important that you really create a good communication within your team. In the perfect case scenario, obviously, your programmer or your team of programmers are all trusted people you've worked with multiple times. And the bigger the shows are getting, the more important is it for the guy who's in the lead as a designer or the associate designer to really rely on the people who are programming the show. And there has to be some mutual understanding. They already, in the perfect world, will already know kind of where the designer wants to head, and they will work by themselves, just kind of led by the designer. On the same level, I think it is very important, at least how I approach shows, to have a very low hierarchy. So there is no reason why any programmer in my team shouldn't have an idea for a song, or shouldn't create a whole song. If he's got a great idea, why not? It's always, if we're playing as a team, it will be way easier. And therefore, communication is key. Communication, and I found another great graphic, very corporate tonight, but I think that kind of shows a little bit the importance of communication. So you've got our lovely designer lady on the left side here. She's got a thought. That thought, first of all, needs to be encoded in her head to put in words. And sometimes it's not that easy to put a creative vision or creative idea into words. So you need to encode it. Then it's transmitted via a medium, obviously, either by a note written down or by just talking to her trusted programmer on the right side, who's a good friend of her. He receives that, but then he decodes it. Obviously, he decodes what she said. And then the interesting thing, the interpretation part here, he interprets what she said. So it will be already different than her thought was. And what we end up is a circle instead of a triangle, which we see which she had in her mind on the right side. So there is a lot of problems, or you can lose a lot of time with the wrong communication. So it's important that all the creatives involved on a show, from top to bottom, from the programmer, from the leading designer, lighting designer, production designer, whatsoever, down to the guys who will translate his visions into reality. As the more kind of seamless that whole process is, the better it is. And therefore, and even though there's not only the programmer on the right side, it's the whole lighting crew, it's the whole crew of a production. And if you go out on the road, it's down to the local stagehand. It's all about communication and creating that. So it's pretty much right on an hour, nearly through our little talk tonight or today. So we want to look. So we went through all the steps. We went through all the steps on our little example project. So we had our visions in our mind. We did our homework. We did our research. We found out all the budget restraints, what Gianna Nannini, the Italian artist, what she likes, and so on and so forth. So we gathered all that. We created the first design. Our lovely studio guy drew up some amazing CAD plots. Then when we sold it to her in the second step, we created some visualization, some renders. We showed it to her. She signed it off. She signed off the money to create the show. We built it to save some time on site. We also did some pre-programming work. We used VisiVig or whatever, or ESP Vision or MA 3D to pre-queue it. Then we had an amazing time on site. We had good laughs with our programmer team, and we created that show. And in an efficient way, we got to a final end result. Some images here from that show, which looks right for her because we did our homework. We found out we are talking about an Italian rock lady who had her big times in the 80s. So it is very important to stay within an 80s look. It wouldn't help us at all to create a massive LED screen behind her to make it look very poppy. So it all stays within kind of her or a corporate identity, which suits her. Some images of the show. And she was happy, we were happy. We spent a lot of nights on the bar because we managed to get through our workload during rehearsals in a few hours, and the show was a great success. And we went through it without any bigger or major headaches. We will still have headaches. There's one thing, it will never go to plan. There will be always hurdles in your way. But if you attack them the right way, or if you approach a certain project the right way, or design work the right way, you can make those hurdles quite low. You don't need to fear those hurdles at all. So it's about efficiency. It's about working in a show in the right manner. Never forget to have always a laugh on your face, because at the end of the day, we are bringing fun to the people. We are bringing joy to the people. We are creating this scenery for somebody to perform in, but we don't rescue lives. And there will be shit days, but if you go into the shit days with a laugh, it will be way easier to come out of it, and you will be still more efficient. You will always be more efficient being in a good mood instead of being grumpy or angry or whatever, or sad or whatsoever. So have fun out there creating shows, and possibly I could have helped a little bit with my little workflow and plan of attack, which we just discussed. So that's all I've got. If you've got any questions, possibly I have some answers for you. At least I will try my best to have some answers for you.
Hey, Roland, this has been fantastic, man. Really appreciate it. We do have some questions here in the Q&A box, so we'll kind of just jump right into that. What are your thoughts about the, in quotes, always having to keep at least some front lights on the lead singer, end quotes, debate?
I think it's quite important. I mean, it always comes down what's happening on show or on your stage, and what kind of show you're lighting technically. Because if you're lighting whatever Rammstein, you can be a little bit more artsy fartsy. If it is whatever 9 Inch Nails, you can be a little bit more artsy fartsy. If you're lighting the Rolling Stones, they should always be seen. But nevertheless, even if you play a little bit with different ways of lighting people on stage, doing floor lighting or just backlighting for an effect, even though you're doing that, there should be always moments in the show where they could be seen with either proper key lighting or side lighting, so they're see. Because we should never forget, again, it's not about us or our art form. It's a lot of the people come to see their stars and their band on stage, and they want to see the faces of them.
Excellent. You talked a little bit about communication throughout the session. So here's a question about some of those communication patterns. And what are your preferred tools to establish a common artistic vocabulary between you and the artist? How do you know you are communicating clearly?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, sometimes you're lucky and you end up with people who really could articulate their vision and their ideas in a very good way. Sometimes you will end up with people where you definitely need to learn the vocabulary of a certain person. So you can end up somebody telling you, I love the look you've just created. Roland, this is amazing. But now, if we could add a little bit more love and vibe to it, it would be amazing. And if you've never worked with that guy before, you stand there and you've got two question marks in your face where you say, it's like, what does he mean by love or by vibe? Or is love now red, or is it blue, or is it anything? That is an example I had with an artist who told me he wants to add a little bit more love to something, and he meant a little bit more movement in the lights, but you need to find that out. It's a delicate way. There is no real answer how you should approach to find that out. It depends on your counterpart, and it depends if you can simply ask the question and say, hey man, it's like very sorry, but I want to understand you. So what do you mean by love? Could you describe that a little bit more in person? So you've got to learn it, but there is no general answer how you could learn it, because it all comes down to your client or your artist you're talking to. But it is important. It's a good point. It's important to understand the vocabulary of your client.
Absolutely. Here's another one. How many and what type of hazers do you prefer in a stadium, if you have a preference on that?
Ooh, as many as possible and as strong as possible, I would say. It all comes down a little bit to what kind of stage design you're dealing with. If you're dealing with an enclosed stage, a classic roof, where you've got side walls and a roof above it, so your performance area is covered to at least 4 sides and not open to all sides. So then you don't need that many. What type of hazer? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that here, but there is a Canadian company who produces lovely haze machines. They are very good, and they've got also some combined haze machines which do smoke and haze. And it all comes down. I mean, if I look at this picture from Rammstein here, we used, I think, 38 hazers and 40 smoke machines. But we used them for 2 reasons, because it was a very open stage, which was hardly protected, a little bit protected on the upstage end, but from no other side. And it was a show where we needed smoke and haze. But nevertheless, even having that amount of crackers and smoke machines, you're still kind of often fighting the elements. And you could end up without having any haze, even so having this amount of machines around.
Going to get to a few more here before we run out of time. How long is the time from the first idea to the first show?
It varies. It comes down to the point, how much time do you have for your first idea until the first show? And that comes down when your client or when the band or somebody approaches you. That could be, in the perfect world, it would be whatever, a year prior to the first show, so that you have every time in the world to really refine your ideas, to do your homework. But you could end up with somebody calling you up a month or 2 months before the first show, or even a few weeks before the first show, obviously not for something more complicated, but a few months or a few weeks before. And hey, I want to have a design for that show. So you've got to deal with the situation. And again, if it comes down to the point where you have way too less time for whatever reasons, it is important to work in an efficient way.
This is an interesting one. Do you keep a sketchbook of ideas for sets or setups so you have some ideas in your pocket to start from for conversations with artists, or do you always start from complete scratch?
Obviously, you have a little drawer full of older sketches and ideas, and you've got some on file on your computer nowadays. But normally, as every artist or band or every show is different and should be different for every reason, normally, if it's by any chance possible, you start from scratch. Obviously, with having those things in your back pocket, and you possibly take an element away from something you've never did in real so far because it's the right fit for that thing. But it should always be based on a specific project and not just, oh, okay, it's a rock artist. I open up my drawer and take out, rock artist, arena. There you go. Should we do this? It's not like selling a car. It's more like custom building a car, hot rodding. We're doing hot rodding, not buying cars from the dealership around the corner.
Right. We have another question here. What pen drafting app was it?
It is called Concepts, Concepts.
Here's another one. What are the steps in finding and building a team?
What are the steps in finding? First of all, I mean, if you start from scratch and if you have never worked with a team, you rely on possibly some suggestions from friends from a certain place or so. It is, for me, there are two important things, and both are, there are three important things. If you look at creating a concert or a music show or anything music related, it's very important that if I choose a programmer or an associate, that he's got a good understanding for music. So I'm interested in somebody who's a good understanding for music, who's also got kind of an own creativity, or somebody who has got a vision by themselves. In the perfect world, this vision kind of aligns or goes, or is pretty much similar to mine, or goes in the same direction. So that's important. Obviously, whatever he does, so if he's programming lighting, he should be capable of programming a lighting rig of the size where I hire him for. And then at the end of the day, and this is possibly all those elements, they're 50 or maximum 60% of the whole thing. It's very important to me as well that he's a nice dude. As I said at the end of my little lecture, it's important to have a smile on his face. I don't want to hire egos or rock stars. And if we work in a team, it doesn't matter how big the team is. It is important for me to keep a low hierarchy, technically, to really work as a team. And it's not, I'm not the boss. We're all playing at the same thing. Obviously, I put possibly at some shows, I put my name on top of them. On others, Patrick puts his name on it, and on others, other people put their name on it. But it should always be on an eye level. So it is important to have somebody without an ego, with a good personality, who's a nice guy all around.
We've got time for just two more questions. First one is everything you do time coded?
No, that's an interesting one. There are shows out there where there's a reason to use time code, but in general, to me, it is quite important. Whenever we can, or whenever I can, I avoid time code, at least for music shows, for concerts, for a certain reason. Time code, obviously, it is perfect, and you always have the same result every night. But if you think a little away from the lighting and things, if you think about music, most of the music which is good, which grooves, and which is really good music, it grooves because it's not always straight on the point. It is a little offbeat. It has some feel to it. It is more organic. It's not that industrial. And the same applies to lighting. And I even say normally, if I watch another show within the first song or so, I can tell you if it's a time-coded show or if it's run manually, because it is, again, it's perfect, yeah, but perfection is not always the best thing to strive for. A time-coded show feels very cold, very industrial, very, not boring is the wrong word, but too perfect. You want something which is organic, which goes with the band. And even if you look at a very complicated thing like Rammstein, where we started the whole tour where 95% of the show was time-coded, down the road I had Mark Brunkert as my programmer and lighting director running most parts of the show. who's very talented, and I love him to bits because he's a great guy and he's very talented, but he's also an amazing musician, so he's got a great understanding. So he learned the music bit for bit. And down the road, by the end of their first leg in 2019, he was doing, I think, 70% of the show he was doing live. Obviously, because of the complexity, he was using both of his hands to run the show, as well as a foot pedal to run other cues, because it was, but still, when we went there, obviously it has to be still, the cues have got to come on time and things like that. So you've got to have somebody to run a show who's talented and who's got a good musical understanding, but you've got somebody who runs it manually with a good musical understanding is in 90% of the cases the better way than timecode, in my opinion.
Excellent. And last one, what are your gig bag essentials, especially for newer workers to build up?
Gig bag essentials. I mean, first of all, obviously a computer, which does all the work what you need to do. Then I'm normally carrying a little suitcase in our day and age, which have got a few goodies there, so like a few moleskins and things like that. An iPad is always good. What I do nowadays also is carry a little kind of video recorder and a camera with me, because it could end up quite handy and useful that you record rehearsals or what you've just programmed for tweaking and working on stuff afterwards.
Excellent. Well, that's all the time we have for with the questions. Roland, thank you so much again for your time and for this awesome session. Thank you for everyone who joined us and for all the questions. The recorded version of this webinar will be available here in the next couple days or so. So please be on the lookout for that. And also be sure to check out all of our upcoming sessions on audio, video, lighting, control. And you can access those also on the Harman Training Portal. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Roland. That was awesome. Really enjoyed it.